All right, we are joined now by Kevin Fielder. Kevin, you are a FAU alum. I know you write a little bit about FAU, but tell everyone about kind of all the. Looks like you do a plethora of things.
Yeah, I actually left the FAU beat probably a couple months ago, to take a job covering Kansas State. But for the last 4 years, I was covering FAU basketball, and I was front and center for their rise from empty gyms and in the empty high school gyms, as everyone likes to say on Twitter, to covering a Final Four run. Now, I guess this year, trying to build off of that with pretty much the same core from top to bottom.
Yeah, Kevin, me and Will know a little bit about that. Not the Final Four yet. We're hoping to get to that point, but we definitely were at a few Liberty games back when the tickets were a little easier to come by than they are now. Uh, so, Kevin, talk to us about this year's team. Obviously, let's step back. I want to know first, as someone who obviously cares about the FAU program, what was that Final Four run like last year?
I always say that it was surreal because at every single turn, from the beginning of the season to the end of it when they had lost on whatever that shot was, it was always surreal because you never really expected it to happen. Mid season, you're like, dang, this team looks pretty good. They may be a fine. They may make the tournament. Then they clinch a tournament spot, and you're like, okay, that was cool. When does it end? Right. And it's like they get Memphis in round one. You're going, yeah, that's probably it for Memphis, right? I mean, just, you're playing a good Memphis team, and, they've got talent, they've got dudes, and then they win the game on a buzzer beat, and you're like, okay. Then they've got FDU, and you're like, okay, they could probably beat FDU, right? Purdue couldn't, but, you think that FAU can. Then then you go to the Sweet 16, you've got Tennessee, and you go, all right, that's it. Tennessee's a high major program. They've just got more talent than you. It's over there. Then they win that game. And then you're like, okay, well, I mean, it probably doesn't end here, right? Then it doesn't end. Like it felt like at every turn, it was like they were defying some expectation that I had set on them. And, I had always been sort of a little bit more bearish on them than others in the sense of, you know, they probably have a chance of being good in the NCAA tournament, and then it's probably just going to end in the round of 32 or the round of 64. And outside of the one bracket I put where FAU made the Final Four because, well, I'm an FAU alum and I have to do it regardless. But like other than that, I was just like, yeah, you know what, it's probably going to end here. And at no point did it really end, and it was surreal. And I think at some point you sort of buy into it, and you go, you know what, this is what it is. And it was I always just like say it was surreal because you never really expected it. And, covering a Cinderella team, not, a team that was expected to be there when the season started, made it even cooler.
Yeah.
And I was gonna just real quick,
Go
if you
ahead.
will, is I was gonna say for maybe the gift of getting Fairleigh Dickinson to the second round, Tennessee was pretty underseeded in a lot of people. Like they finished season sixth in Ken Palm, so like it wasn't necessarily like they just had like this easy path to the Final Four, right?
Yeah, like they got Fairleigh Dickinson, and Fairleigh Dickinson gave him trouble because Fairleigh Dickinson gave everyone trouble in the tournament. We all watched him beat Purdue, and then you get Tennessee, and I thought it ended there. Like I thought once they got Tennessee, they just didn't have a chance, right? Tennessee is that good at basketball, and they beat Tennessee, and I thought that Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson and Kansas State would just be too much, right? Like I mean, they didn't just beat up on bad teams; they beat up on teams that people either thought would make the Final Four or the Elite Eight, or teams that they thought could win a national championship. Like there were people predicting Tennessee to win the national championship. So, like, I never really bought into the idea, and I know everyone else wanted to, that like, oh, they were just playing bad teams, like they got lucky. They didn't really get lucky. Like they were just kind of better than those teams.
Yeah, they found it at the right time, right? Um, just a little geography for Lynchburg is pretty close to UVA, pretty close to Virginia Tech. Um, you know, what was it like for the community of Boca to kind of like get behind? Florida Atlantic. Of course, like the alum are, very excited about that. But like, did you see much impact like in the area for that?
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, FAU just doesn't get a lot of community support in basketball before last season, right? Like there were fans going, like some alumni, some boosters, some students would go because, well, it's a basketball game on campus, but there wasn't like sold out crowds. Most of the crowds were empty, and Dusty May had tried to change that. And I think, at some point you just sort of reserve it to it's going to have to happen through wins. And so when they started to win and they make the NCAA tournament, everyone in the area is talking about FAU, right? Like I would go to the grocery store wearing an FAU jacket and someone would stop me and talk about them. And before, if you're wearing an FAU jacket, everyone just sort of looks and keeps walking because there's nothing to talk about with FAU basketball or even FAU football at that time. So the community really embraced the team. And I think the thing that's interesting was it was not just a 1 month embrace. After the season ended, they held a sort of like a congratulations party kind of thing, and that thing was sold out too. Like they held it at an outdoor like amphitheater thing, and there was not you couldn't even walk there without bumping into someone. And then this season, the first 2 home games of the season against Eastern Michigan and Bryant is sold out. And I tried to get tickets to one of the games, right? Like as a fan, and the tickets were $50 each. And 2 years ago, the ticket was $5, and frankly, you probably could have walked in and they wouldn't have stopped you. So everything changed, and everyone started to embrace the program. And to the community's credit, they're still embracing the program.
Yeah, I got some notes here on FAU. So last year finished 17th in KenPom, never ranked higher than 129 prior to that, never ranked higher than 186 before Dusty May came along. So we thought like Liberty's leap from 2018 to 2019 was a lot. This is like on a whole nother level. But Kevin, obviously FAU loses to Bryant, and everyone comes out of the woodwork. Oh, FAU's overrated. FAU's overrated. And then what do? They turn around and beat Butler, beat number 12 Texas A&M, and then just absolutely beat the snot out of Virginia Tech. So before we talk about that tournament, what happened against Bryant? How does that game happen?
I always say this as someone who's watched basketball for a long time and talks to coaches every day from the high school level and the college level. Like there are just some games where, man, the ball just is not going in the hoop. And that was one of those games. Like I think that they were probably a little over-reliant on the 3 ball in that game. And they start taking some shots when they get down 5 or 6 because, there's pressure on FAU now, right? Like, I mean, the old cliche of they're going to get another team's best game is true, right? Like they got Bryant's best shot and they hung around and they sort of kept delivering some punches to stay in the game, but they just couldn't make shots down the stretch. And it was concerning to a sense. Like, yeah, man, you got to make shots eventually. But like, I also think that like it was just one of those games. And obviously during the tournament, during that ESPN Invitational, they had proven that it was just one of those games. And you have those games throughout the season. Last season, FAU had those games, and for the most part, they were able to survive them and pull out wins. And so we'll see if this year they're able to survive those games where they shoot 30%, 20% from 3, and it just feels like the ball isn't going in the hoop. But it was just really one of those games for the most part.
Well, so this tournament, I watched a little bit of these games. I watched. I put on a replay of Texas A&M. Fell asleep to that last night. And kind of my initial observation is just obviously FAU has some really, really talented players, but they played, at least against Texas A&M, so disciplined. That was kind of the biggest takeaway that I had, is it's not just that you have really good players, you also have really disciplined players. Top 25 offense, top 40 defense, both of the last 2 years. So a balanced team. Is that kind of what you see out of this team?
Yeah, under Dusty May, they're balanced, they're disciplined, they know their roles. Like all the cliches I could throw out there, they probably fit. I think the thing was against Butler in particular, they felt like they were playing a little too rigid. And last season, the thing that sort of defined FAU was they played freely, they played loosely, they played like they had nothing to lose. And I think to an extent, it's because they had nothing to lose, right? Like this is a team that had never been in that situation before. So you're not playing with these lofty and crushing expectations on you. This season, early on the season, it just sort of felt like something was off, right? Like you can't really explain it. It just sort of feels like something isn't right and something isn't clicking. And then against Texas A&M and Virginia Tech, they just felt looser. Against Texas A&M, Elijah Martin started to get a little hot. He started to hit his shots a little bit more. And, he was having the same confidence that he had last season of, he wasn't afraid to take a shot. And if he missed the shot, he'd go back and he'd take that shot again 3 different times. It's felt like in some of these early games, he was just sort of trying to find his rhythm. I think part of that is because he was hurt. He had a stress fracture in the offseason. And as he's recovering from that, I think he's just trying to an extent, take it easy. But now, he's playing like someone who is looking to win games again and is comfortable in his role and comfortable taking those shots. And I think that's the biggest thing is that now, through these last 2 games, this is a team playing comfortably. And this is a team that's sort of embracing those lofty expectations. And they're not a team that feels like it's a crushing weight of expectations on them that like they have to be at their best during every single game.
So Elijah Martin, as you mentioned, he was co-preseason AAC Player of the Year, but the reason he was co-preseason AAC Player of the Year is because he was co-players with his teammate, which just shows how ridiculously talented this team is. But on Martin, one thing that stood out for me, obviously scored 55 points in the 3 games in the ESPN Invitational, scored 26 in the Final Four against San Diego State, very efficient shooting in that game, and then scored 30 points in the CUSA championship game. Is he just a player that feels like he kind of really rises to the moment in these big games?
Yeah, he was the guy last year when they needed a bucket. He was going to be the guy with the ball in his hands, and he was going to try and make a play. And the thing that is really impressive is his growth as a complete offensive player. Like, he's no longer just the athletic dude who can dunk. He's the athletic dude who can dunk, who can shoot the 3, who can play as an off-ball, secondary scorer if he needs to. He's still a great defender. Like, he's now become that all-around player that not only do NFL or NBA, scouts covet, but like, the FAU team needed that, right? Like, they needed a dude who's going to step up and make plays. And he's the guy who, when FAU needs a bucket, even if he's shooting 4 for 30 from the floor, he's never seen a shot he doesn't like. And I think that's like really what FAU needed, was a dude who is not going to be afraid to take the shot, not going to be afraid of the expectations and the weight of taking said shot. He's just going to take the shot and he's going to live with the results of it because he trusts his own abilities.
And then one other player I wanted to ask you about is the other co-player of the year, Davis Jr. Scouting report on here: compact, strong, powerful 2-guard who projects as a possible second-round pick in the 2024 draft. I know both of these players tested the NBA draft waters and decided to come back. What makes Davis such a special player? I know he was 6th man of the year last year, has kind of had to carry a little bit more of a load this season.
So I love John L. Davis, right? Because John L. Davis is one of those guys you cover and he doesn't say much. Like, he's not a very good interview, but you just sort of feel like he's got that confidence to him. And he's got that ability of like, I'm going to beat you, right? Like, you're going to punch me and I'm going to punch you back 3 different times. And I'm going to make you fall to the ground because like some of that's his upbringing. Some of that's the fact that he was a little bit under recruited coming out of high school. And now he's into this position where he's the guy and he's played point guard. He's played like small ball 5. He plays across the floor and he makes plays, right? He's a playmaker. He's a guy who's going to get the plays, who's going to, be a solid passer and distributor. And then, if you need a bucket, he's going to be able to find a way to create his own shot. I think that he's probably, as of now, the more likely NBA talent between him and Martin. I think both are going to be on NBA scouting, NBA scouts watch list. Same with Vlad Golden, the center who's played incredibly good this season. But Davis in particular, right? Like, he's the NBA talent of a guy who can do a little bit of everything. Sort of jack of all trades, really not a master of none. Like, he's not going to stand out and be like an elite 3-point shooter or an elite point, like an elite 2-guard, but he's just going to be really dang good at everything. And for me, those guys sort of really help because, you need guys who can score buckets. You need guys who are going to play good defense. You also need guys who you can just trust to do everything. And that's what John L. Davis is. He's a guy who can just do everything for you.
So Nick Boyd was out during that tournament. I wouldn't expect you to have the full inside scoop. I know college coaches are about as hard to get, especially at the basketball level, about as hard to get injury information out as just about anything else. Do you have any idea if he is coming back? Do you have any how big of a loss is he if he's not in the lineup? Obviously, they played very well without him this past weekend.
Yeah, so Dusty May had mentioned, I seen it on Twitter, and I wish I could tell you who it was who had tweeted out. I think it was like Bleacher Brothers or something. If I'm wrong there, like I apologize to the person who tweeted this out, but like he was a guy. Dusty May had said that he's probably not going to play against Liberty. I think his words were, "I don't expect it, but I'm not going to rule it out." Right? Like so, to some degree, like I don't think it was expected that Giancarlo Rosado, the other guy who was out for most of that ESPN Invitational, was going to play against Virginia Tech, but he played against Virginia Tech, so I wouldn't rule it out. But it feels like they're going to be without him for Liberty, and that's a loss. He's the quintessential role player who just makes the key shot, doesn't get the attention that other guys get, but when you need the three, he's going to make the threes. He's been a really good playmaker for them. I'm going to say though that, like, to their credit, FAU's got the depth to sort of forget about him into a sense. Like, they can handle a game without him, and they proved that during the ESPN Invitational. If he can't go, I think we're going to see a lot more Brian Greenlee and Jabbar Gaffney, or Jalen Gaffney, excuse me. Jabbar Gaffney's the football player, but Jalen Gaffney, and I think that those two have proven that they can be high level, impactful role players. Greenlee's a great shooter. Gaffney's a great defender. They're going to use them both. And then if Nick Boyd can play, that's a huge boost for FAU. But he's not a guy who is irreplaceable. And I don't really think there's a guy on FAU's team that, if they had to miss him for a game, he's irreplaceable. But Nick Boyd is like the quintessential role player who FAU would like to have in a game like this.
Well, you got any other questions for Kevin?
Yeah. Well, Kevin, Conference USA, Liberty's new to the conference. Florida Atlantic is out and, went out on top. Is that something that's just, for you, just rear view mirror, or are there still like some interest there in kind of what, is happening in Conference USA?
I think that I'm just that guy who, the quintessential, I guess we call him sickos committee. I watch every college basketball, right? Like I was watching Hawaii scrimmages on ESPN Plus because it's college basketball. So I am interested in the Conference USA. And I think it's a conference that this year in particular looks a little interesting because Liberty is really dang good at basketball. And, I think Middle Tennessee is always up there for basketball. And there are some other teams in that conference who interest you because you don't know what they're going to give you on any given night. And so, like, I'm watching the conference still. Like, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm the expert who can like pull out the stats on every single player in the conference. Like maybe I was last season because I had to be, but it's still an interesting conference, and football was still probably not as interesting, but the basketball itself is, I think, always going to be interesting in Conference USA.
What's your thoughts on the AAC? Obviously a much bigger conference than Conference USA. You don't get to play like the true round robin. What's kind of your thoughts on some of these other teams and some new teams, some not, that you're going to see this year?
Yeah, I love the way that Conference USA is built, or not a Conference USA, the American is built this year. Obviously there's the new rivalry with Memphis that every FAU fan loves to latch onto. And, you have USF, who I'm really excited for. I think that they're sort of building a team that's going to be competitive. Then you've got the newcomers in this conference. We're talking North Texas, UAB. Like these are teams that were constantly at the top of Conference USA, and I think they're going to be at the top of the American. And I'm really excited that this is a multiple bid league because it feels like this season there's going to be a few teams that are in the hunt for at least the conversation of making the tournament. And, hopefully it's a league that, you get more than two. Like it would be kind of disappointing if it's two and it's like Memphis and FAU, because I think that some other teams are playing at a high level. Tulane, for example. And then you mentioned those newcomers who were at the top of Conference USA last year and were playing well in tournaments. And so like it was weird because Conference USA got left with the scraps, but those scraps are still pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I think the American this year is going to be incredibly exciting to watch, especially once we get into conference play.
I don't think you'll have to worry about East Carolina too much.
Oh, no, probably not. I mean, in football, FAU had to worry about them seemingly, but that's another conversation. This is not a football show, and I'd rather it not be.
We won't have to worry about Wichita and Charlotte. Liberty already beat up on them.
Yeah.
Last question for you. I really appreciate your time. This has been awesome, kind of getting to know Liberty's next opponent in this really big game coming up. Outside of the top two players, the co-players of the year, who's one guy that really you think maybe is the other key for this game against Liberty?
I'm going to give you two. I had mentioned Vlad Golden, and I think that, I'd mentioned on Twitter that, if there were not superhumans at center in the nation right now, he'd be an All-American candidate because he's a double-double machine. He's a guy who's added stuff to his game. He's become a little bit better of a playmaker. He's become a reliable free throw shooter, and that's a credit to his work ethic. And then I'm also going to say his backup, Giancarlo Rosado. He didn't play a lot during the ESPN Invitational, but when you have a guy like him off the bench, and they've experimented with playing them both together, you have another big man who, unlike Golden, is sort of a modern day big man in the sense that he can dribble, he can make plays with the ball in his hands, and he's got a little bit of a jump shot. He's not going to stretch it out to the 3-point line, but a mid-range jumper, a jumper from the elbow, like he can make those jumpers, and he can drive with the ball in his hands. And so he's one of those guys that like you sort of get the yin and the yang with Rosado and Golden, of like both these guys who can do different things at a really high level. And when they're playing together, like it's sort of unique because they take similar areas on the court, and FAU doesn't like to clog the lane so much, but it's worked at times because they can still both do something a little bit different. Like Rosado plays a little bit more at the free throw line and dribbles and tries to make plays from there. And I think Golden's more of your typical, like when you think of post up centers, he's a guy who's going to post up and use the 7-foot body that he's got to his advantage.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, really do appreciate all your time. Thanks so much for coming on here on short notice and giving us a preview, and good luck this week.
Absolutely. Thanks. And anytime, guys, and happy to be on.
All right.
Thanks.
We're going to have a quick word from Experience Leesburg, and then we'll be back to wrap this bad boy up.
It's real Florida. It's old Florida, and it's close to all of the Central Florida attractions. Crystal clear natural springs in one of the largest chain of lakes. The beautiful lakefront city of Leesburg offers the best in outdoor adventures, fishing, and quaint shops and restaurants on historic downtown Main Street. Come visit and see how welcoming a hometown city feels. Experience Leesburg, the way Florida is meant to be.
All right. Well, there you go. There's your FAU preview. Huge game, Will. Man, I'm jacked for this. I won't actually be able to watch live, unfortunately. I'm going to be traveling on Thursday, so I'll be shutting off the phone. I will watch that late at night. Try to watch it live without any spoilers. And I'm not sure I'll be able to watch Charlotte at all. So rough weekend to be traveling, but nonetheless, I'm still very excited for these games and this test for Liberty. Anything from that interview or anything about FAU really kind of stand out to you, Will?
Not much other than Kevin is the Florida Atlantic version of Nick Kirby. No, like just really good information about, Martin, John L. Davis Jr. Hey, if you were Coach McKay, who are you putting on those guys?
I'm probably putting Van Zandt on Davis. Davis is about 2 inches taller, so
yeah.
Florida Atlantic has a kind of a wild like main rotation. They have 6'0", 6'3", 6'2", 6'4", and then 7'1". So they run pretty small four guards. They will play some of they have a 6'8" and a 6'9" guy off the bench. They'll play one of those sometimes with Vlad Golden, their 7'1" guy. But I mean, obviously, I think Van Zandt goes on Davis, and then obviously the test for Cleveland and Shiloh, and maybe even Sutherland. We've kind of saw him get some minutes of late. On Vlad Golden will be huge. Interested to see if his early season free throw shooting can keep up. He's up to 70% this year, but last year he was only at 58.5%. And the year before that was just barely over 61%. So he hasn't been a very good free throw shooter. It's small sample, but he's improved. But is he due for some, free throw regression for a guy that hasn't, shot very well overall? But the 7-1 guy out of Russia, Texas Tech transfer. They're talented, man. I watched a little bit of that tournament, and then last night I tried to really focus in and watch a little bit of that Texas A&M game, as that was their toughest. I don't know what the heck happened against Bryant, because I watched that game. I'm just like, man, these guys are good. This is a legit top 10 caliber team. This team's better than Alabama. I know if Liberty beats Alabama, that's going to be the game that everyone would they're a tougher team than Alabama. This is a legit top 10, at least top 15 team. This is a team that can make the Final Four again. Liberty would have to have an incredible effort to beat this team on the road.
Yeah, I feel like the defensive effort is going to really have to be there.
Yeah.
Florida Atlantic shoots a lot of threes, and they make a lot of threes. So I feel like if you can get that pack line locked in pretty early, create some confusion, maybe make them force some bad shots, you got a chance of them kind of maybe running out of gas towards the end with some tired legs, maybe missing some of those 3-pointers. I think the defense is going to keep them in the game no matter what. And you hope that this is not one of those games that Liberty, usually has, 2 or 3 times a season where they just cannot buy a bucket.
Yeah, gonna have to make threes in this game.
Yeah,
that is for sure. FAU top 40 in 3-point defense so far this year. So no, they're not actually that good. They're only 121st in 3-point defense. I was looking at the wrong one. But yeah, I mean, they are overall a good defensive team. But they'll give up some threes. So yeah, it'll be interesting. This will be a great test. I'm interested to see. Liberty has felt like they've had much more depth early in this year than I think any of us anticipated. Team feels a lot deeper. How will that depth look against the best team that you've played all year? That's kind of what I'm looking for. How are some of the the Liberty role players? How Brody Peebles, can Brody Peebles kind of be the guy that we've seen that's been just that bucket getter off the bench? How will could Xander Yates provide something off the bench? I'm not really as worried about Rode and Matheny and Porter. But yeah, I think Shiloh might be the big key off the bench coming in and providing that second center. Maybe McKay tries to play Cleveland and Robinson together, especially since FAU sometimes will have Davis at 6'4" playing the 4. This is a fun coaching matchup, as these two guys are two of the best mid-major coaches in the entire country. So really looking forward to that.
Yeah. I feel like McKay is usually playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. I think Cleveland could be a key in this game. A little bit scary against Maryland Eastern Shore there in the first few minutes, where he was kind of grabbing at his elbow. And I mean, he stayed in the game, but you don't know how much of that is adrenaline. If it's, I haven't heard anything about it being more serious or, anything than just a little pain at the beginning, of the game. But hopefully there's nothing there. But he's played with a lot of intensity. He's kind of, backing some guys down, and I think, might need some of that.
Yeah. And I mean, heard some reports. Cleveland's kind of, maybe Liberty's potential NBA talent. This is a game you need an NBA talent type player to step up. So yeah, I like that a lot.